everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Rina, and in this video I'm going to talk about how to draw practically any pose and how to study anatomy in general as an artist because I feel like it's very difficult, and for a lot of artists it's like a really big struggle to particularly learn how to draw poses and stuff like that. This video is going to be mostly for a practice and for a long run, but at the same time some techniques that you can use to draw any pose, even if it's a very complex one. So in the beginning we're going to look at some of the different approaches you can take to drawing bodies, and then I'm going to show you kind of like a live drawing moment of how I practice learning anatomy and how I personally draw any pose. So the first method is one of the most popular one, is a stick man, and I feel like everybody saw this. You just draw a stick man, but it is a little bit more detailed. You basically break down a figure into kind of like stick-like moments. It's really difficult to explain, but I'm going to try to show as many references as I can. There are different variations of stickmans. On some of them you can see the proportions very well and how many heads it should include, the body should include. And then there is a more complex kind of stickman, more dimensional one. So if you have a reference with light and specific light source, you can break down your figure into simple shapes rather than just stick. And even if you don't have a lot of experience in dimensional drawing, if you just break down each part of the body into like a simple shape, especially if you have a light source on your reference, you can pretty much draw any pose. And then there's the last approach that I personally love and I was doing in the art school for a long time, and these are sketches by Rembrandt, like a more traditional way of drawing people and anatomy and poses, basically just looking at the reference and drawing as you see it. But the main point I think in that approach, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit more later, is to really look closely on the reference. And I'm going to talk about my favorite, the third approach in more details. But for now, let's talk about the fourth one. The fourth one is a bean bag, or a bean guy, or bean human. Basically, it's when you draw a little bean in a specific form or shape, depending on the reference that you have, depending on the pose. And the pose that I have right now is a little bit tricky to use this technique on, but I'll try and I will show you better examples in the video, so please stick with me. It's really easy when you just look at the object, when you just look at the character as a bean, and you imagine it, how it will fold or how it will curve depending on the pose. And especially if you have a very cartoony or anime style, it's very easy to use this technique if you have like a simpler minimalistic style. I feel like if you want to draw more like semi-realistic or realistic, you should know a little bit more anatomy details like muscles and joints, the locations of such and stuff like that. But we're not going to talk about this here. This video is more focusing on poses specifically. So I'm going to show you the figure drawing websites that I like to use. Basically, you just Google figure drawing websites, and these are like a few popular ones that I use. A line of action, quick poses. There are a lot of pose references on Pinterest and Instagram. I just have separate folders for just poses on Instagram and on Pinterest, where I just save while I'm scrolling if I like something, so I just save it there. Let's look at this website. This is the website called Line of Action, and you can really customize your reference and really practice very well with this website. And this is not sponsored or anything. This is my very first video on YouTube on this channel, by the way. So first you need to choose what you want to draw, and you can choose models nude or covered. Because we're on YouTube, I'm going to show only covered models. And then you can kind of go down and see if you want to only see male models or female models, and I feel like for the purpose of this video, I'm going to use both. And then you go to ages. In this video, we're going to draw adults. So for the second one, I just leave it as it is. And then for the third one, the time interval. This is a very important one because it means for how long you will see the reference on your screen, because there's going to be a timer. And if you want to get really good with any poses and anatomy, as I said, for a long run, you can do this exercise like every day or at least several times a week. When you set a time interval for like 60 seconds to 2 minutes, and then for like 10 or 30 minutes, you just do these poses, and the quicker the better. The quicker, the more poses you do, you draw, the easier and easier it will get if you practice a lot. And then you can also put a longer timer, like 5 or 10 minutes, to get into more of a study mode and look into the poses a little bit closer. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to use Procreate for this one, and I draw it in a live mode. I recorded it as it was, so I'm going to draw this reference, and I'm just using the method number 3, my favorite one. And now I'm going to talk a little bit more about how I personally can draw any pose and what is this method about in more details. First of all, tip number 1, you have to look at the reference 90% of the time, or maybe even 95. I'm not looking at my screen that much. I'm mostly looking at the reference, and it's a little bit tricky when you're just starting, but it's fine. You will get into it. Just do it. And that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm just looking at the reference really closely, and I'm trying to repeat it, and I'm looking at it a lot. I'm almost not looking at what I'm drawing or my brushes or anything. Another one, try to not focus a lot on details. First, you get the main shapes, main forms, and if you have a timer of 10 minutes, even 10 minutes for some people, it's not a lot of time. 10 minutes is, for me, is enough to draw like a detailed pose sketch. So I'm just focusing on overall shapes and forms, and I'm going to add a little bit more details and shadowing afterwards, but at first you just look at that. And then try to also not use a lot of eraser too often, and Ctrl Z and undo button. You don't really need to be perfect if it's just for practice, especially if you're doing 60 seconds or 30 seconds or 2 minute sketch. No need for that. And also you can do it on paper as well. You don't have time to grab an eraser and erase something if you have just 60 seconds to draw a sketch. So try to focus on getting the shapes right from the first try, and if it doesn't work from the first try, I'm talking about shorter timer, that's fine. That's totally fine. You don't have to get it perfect each and every time. And I feel like the most important thing that a lot of new artists don't understand, that you don't have to make it look right every time, especially in the beginning. It will not look right, and that's fine. You should not obsess over just one sketch. It should be like a one-time sort of experience, one-time sort of almost like a tool and material that you use and then move on. So you draw it and then go to the next one, and then you draw it again. Oh, you didn't have enough time to finish it, or it doesn't look right. That's fine. We have to move on. If you use a short timer, that's how I would do it, and that's how I did it for a long time. It also works very well if you draw on paper, on a larger format of paper, and if you use charcoal, for example, and if you have just like 60 seconds or 2 minutes, perfect for practice every day for like 20 minutes, and you will have like so much progress. And then you can see that I like automatically got a new reference. Once my timer finished, I got a new photo, and I'm just trying to work with it. As you can see, this reference, I feel like it's more tricky, especially because of the position of the head, and also when you have the figure standing or crossing legs, it's very easy to make it look awkward and stiff. So there are ways to improve it. First of all, you have to kind of imagine the spine, how it will look, how the spine looks on the reference, or like imagine at least. and then have this imaginary line on your drawing, or maybe not imaginary, you can even draw it, and it will make it look more similar to the reference. And then another thing to make it look more similar, I look at the negative space. So the space between the head and arms, for example, or any other space, there's not that much negative space on this one, but if it's more complex pose, and for example the figure sitting and crossing legs or holding some objects, to make it look realistic, more natural, you should look at the negative space. And tip number 3, to make it look more like a reference, try to use liquidity tool or transformation tool if you draw digitally. And if you use Procreate, it's very easy to do if you're drawing not like a quick sketch, but if you're working on some project or making an illustration or a study of some pose, you can definitely try to use a liquidity tool and really easily fix. And so I got another reference, and here I was trying to use the stickman method. As you can see, I drew a quick sketch and I made the transparency very low so I can work on the new layer. I'm not used to draw with a specific method, but it depends on the pose, it depends on the mood. Sometimes I want to use this or other method. You should really try all of them and see which one works better for you. So when you're trying to use the stickman method, try to first mark some proportions. Just look at the reference closely and see where the arm ends. For example, where the arm, like the left arm, ends in the comparison to the right one, and kind of try to look at and study the reference closely, and then mark it as some like circle or dot on your sketch, and try to make it look as balanced as possible. You can also look up some basic proportions. For example, how many heads is in the like correct sort of proportion. Of course everybody's different and stuff like that, but there are some standards you can use as a base in the beginning. So looking close at the reference and comparing objects in relation to one another, you can see if one of the arms is longer than another, because you can see the balance of elbows and the balance of like fingers. I don't know, it's really difficult to explain, but like the distance between the objects. And again, try to think about all the elements of the body as objects and simplify them as much as possible. And again, because I don't see part of the body, it's kind of difficult to draw it correctly. That's why I encourage you guys, if you just started drawing, try to draw like nude models or models with like some costumes that are like, that is, you can easily see like muscles and body, because it will be easier for you to study like that. And another life hack that I can give you, try to mirror your drawing as much as possible, and you will see all your mistakes really easily once you mirror your image. Especially if you work on the drawing for a long time, you kind of stop seeing any mistakes that you make, and that's totally normal. You kind of focus on details more and you stop seeing the bigger picture. So try to mirror it. You will see most of your mistakes that way, and I hope that helps. And I think that's the best way to learn anatomy and to draw any pose, is to practice a lot with quick sketches without attaching to each one of them, and just move on with each single one. If you can't finish it, if you make mistakes, again, this might be really hard in the beginning, but you can do it. And just be a little bit more consistent about it. I know it's getting like really hard sometimes to stay consistent, but even a little bit of practice is still practice. And for just any pose, try to use these methods. Let me know if it worked. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to my channel, like this video, and I also have Instagram. If you want, you can follow me there. All my social media down below. Thank you. See ya. Bye bye.